Okay, good morning. Major General Sean Gainey, the Director of the Joint Counter-UAS Office, the Executive Agent for Counter-UAS within DoD for the Army. What I'm going to do today is talk to you a little bit about what the Army as the Executive Agent is doing against the UAS problem that's out there and what how we're attacking the UAS problem with our counter-UAS solutions through the entire .mil PF process and not just focused on the material solution. So normally when I speak on counter-UAS, I'll stand up here and walk you through the entire brief. But today I have a team, my entire team is here, not the entire team, but most of my team is here to walk you through what we do day in and day out against this very difficult UAS problem set that's out there. So if I'd like to go to the next slide. So just a little bit about who we are and what we do as the Joint Counter-UAS Office. Again, the Secretary of Defense, just for as a quick recap, decided that DoD needed a service to serve as the executive agent to frame from an enterprise approach the counter-UAS problem set and get after this problem. And essentially by doing that, he appointed the Army as the executive agent, and the Army appointed my office, the Joint Counter-UAS Office, to execute on behalf of the Army. Now, what I'll show you later is, although the Army is assigned to do this counter-UAS mission, we do have joint participation inside of our organization. Now that joint enterprise will grow over time, but right now it's consolidated into a division so that we ensure we have the joint integration into our organization as we move forward. So as you look up at the slide, today what I'm going to do is I'm really going to focus on the joint counter-UAS portion. Even though in my role inside of the G357, I also serve as the DAMO fires, which essentially all the air and missile defense and field artillery issues inside of the Army, I handle that on one side of my duty descriptions. On the other side is the Joint Counter-UAS Office that you'll see behind me with 5 divisions that I'll introduce some of those participants to highlight what we do on a day in and day out basis. So my organization, Command Sergeant Major Carr and myself and Leland Browning is my deputy, and Bill Parker as my military deputy, essentially lead this organization with a whole lot of help. And some of my division chiefs that you see down here, my parent is my A&R division chief, and in his role, he is responsible for sorting through the several material options that are out there to employ against the counter-UAS Group 1 through 3 problem set, and that's from small quadcopter all the way up to these Group 3, almost cruise missile type attack systems that you see out there. Mike Parent, he runs demos twice a year to really work with industry and try to bring to the joint force that optimal system, or shall I say systems, because there's not just one system that's going to solve this problem, and how we're going to integrate that into our C2 system and be able to employ capabilities for all the warfighters globally. So that's what Mike does, and he'll come up here and talk a little bit about that in more detail. Cedric Lee is my requirements and capability division chief, and what he does is essentially what I said. He helps set the requirements, so we deliver capability to those requirements, and he assists in the capability bringing it on board into DoD so that we're not just going after a bunch of stuff out there, and we're focusing it on requirements and technology that's going to get after our capability gaps that we face on a day in and day out with all our co-coms out there. Who's not here today is Nicole Thomas, who is my policy division chief, and really she wrote, and her team wrote the DoD strategy and really framed the problem from an enterprise perspective for DoD and how we're going to move forward in this counter-UAS problem set. And I have also Clay Nichols, Colonel Clay Nichols, who's the Air Force, who is in charge of my joint integration division. And so that's where we bring the joint team together so that the joint, so it's a joint problem set, and we solve this from a joint perspective, not just from a Army perspective. And then Mike Roddick is my ops division chiefs. And the way I leverage him is essentially I get him out to the warfighters and figure out what's going on with the warfighters. How can we assist in solving your problem as a warfighter? Again, not from just the material perspective, but from the non-material too, whether it's training, employing your BDOCs in a more beneficial way. That's kind of what my ops team does moving forward. So that's kind of my team. And again, I'm going to leverage my team to come up here and talk to you a little bit. But what I would like to do is, so why are we here today? And why is this group up here interested in what we do as counter UAS? Because it's a problem. Now, it's a solvable problem. There's a lot out there that'll say it's probably not solvable. But when we get into the Q&A portion of this, I challenge you to challenge me on what we're doing, what's out there, and how we're getting after this problem set moving forward. So let's go to the next slide. So the next slide is going to highlight some stuff that you all have probably seen, whether you're looking on the website or internet. Most of you don't have the benefit, like I and my team do, to see the threat and the capabilities we employ into it. So what we want to do is focus on the threat and why it's important. What you saw right there is a friendly system taking out a UAS. We have that capability, and I would tell you that most countries have that capability. But what you then see is how, through the use of technology, those UASs are also able to triangulate back to that shooter and take that shooter out. So again, we may have success, but there's another component of that. And then it shows the use that you're seeing now from stuff maybe in Russia or in CENTCOM AOR, and how this technology is being leveraged not only from an ISR perspective, but also to deliver effects on what that ISR is feeding back to the parent unit. And again, and then my challenge working with our COCOM partners is, how do we stop the one-way attack UASs that have grown from these quadcopter type threat that everybody sees and is more of a hazard and more to destructive loitering munitions that you saw at the Nagorno-Karabakh, or that you're seeing now in Iraq with the in Russia and Ukraine, what the Russians are using right now. So this kind of highlights that, and this is the loitering munition piece that really tells the story of what I'm highlighting, why this is so important, and why my office was designated to get after this problem set. And again, I did a lot of highlighting of my organization, but my organization does not do this alone. Again, my team will go into more detail, but the services and the material leaders of all the services partner with us in the JCO to deliver that capability to get after what you're seeing on this video right now. Okay, so I think we've seen enough of the video, so I think everybody can appreciate what the threat can do and what we know the threat is doing. Now, I'm going to turn it over to parts of my team, then I'm going to come back up here and answer your specific questions on what we're doing as an Army to get after this problem set. So I'll turn it over to Mike to talk from an A&R perspective of what we're doing.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Colonel Mike Parent. I'm the Acquisition and Resource Division Chief, as General Gainey mentioned. Thank you all for being here today. So what do? So we work to bring relevant and effective capability to the warfighter. And we do this through executing three main objectives. We engage industry, and we do this through bi-weekly industrial industry engagements, and we welcome anyone and everyone to participate in these engagements. We also investigate solutions developed by industry and our partners by participating in ongoing experimentation in demos throughout, not just our own, but others as well. We really want to get into other experimentation and demos to pick up on what is out there that we can use and what the services can use to get after those requirements and after those threat gaps. And we also provide joint community with capability data to inform them on their procurement decisions, provide the warfighter solutions that close those gaps, because that's what's important right now. It's always important to close the gaps, the threat gaps, to look at the requirements and what solutions can fill those requirements and get after those gaps. So then if you go down that left-hand side, you see the material solutions development, what we worked on with the services to fulfill a number of capabilities and solutions out there. Everything from high-powered microwave, low collateral effects interceptor, and also we've even conducted studies, and the next study is we'll look at swarms So we'll continue to look at that, and then that information from those studies will inform how we move forward with demos and experimentation going forward. We also conduct, as General Gainey mentioned, demonstrations. We conducted several demonstrations, and we'll continue to conduct those demonstrations, looking at different focus areas that are impacted by the threat and get after those threats. And we had many successes, looking at the goodness that comes out of those demos. These are the things that we conduct these multiple demonstrations, and they have been inputted into the services solutions or capabilities to affect and get after those threats, and we'll continue to add to this list. And this is not an all-inclusive list, but just gives you an example of what's come out of these demonstrations, what's been provided to the services, and what they have done with it. The services have taken these solutions and capabilities based on their requirement and based on the threat gap, and they have put what industry has brought forward into usable quantities for the warfighter. And then on the right-hand side, our main focus going forward, we're going to continue looking after what engages those threats, and we'll continue to get after that evolving threat. The threat is continuing to evolve. So as it evolves, we too are evolving our focus areas, evolving the solutions that we look for, and through those bi-weekly engagements with industry, we learn what is out there, what industry can bring to us that we can then bring and collect data on to the services to get after those threats. But we don't do this in a vacuum. So we engage with the services and the components, and we look at what do they need and what do they prioritize. And we do this through our FY25 material solution development in previous years and outgoing years, and we'll continue to do this where they bring to us, hey, these are our priorities. We'll then go through those priorities, they'll get a vote, and we'll do a 1 to N on those priorities. And that will determine what solutions and where the joint funding moves to and goes to for that future development. And then we'll also continue with demonstrations. In third quarter of FY23, we are looking at a demo right now. Request for white paper is pending. We're working on that this week. We're hoping to get it out very shortly, either this week or next week. And that request for white paper will outline what we're looking for from industry on a defeat of Group 3 one-way attack. We know this is a threat. We know it's important to the COCOMs. It's important to the services. We want to make sure that we can put this out to industry and let them come back with the solutions. We're not going to tell them how to do it. They're going to come back and tell us how they can solve this problem and to get after this threat, which is continuing to evolve. Our adversaries are continuing to evolve this threat, and we must be able to be in the forefront to get at it, and that's what that demo intends to do. And then lastly, we also are looking at more experimentation. General Gainey said, hey, we're working on these demos, that's nice, Mike, but let's go out and start doing other things as well. So we want to get involved with other experimentation, like I mentioned earlier, with the services, with the COCOMs, forward in theater as well, but also looking at our own other experimentation and other things that we can work on besides the demonstrations. And this EWV baseline was, in effect, doing just that. We looked at, hey, we haven't gone back to these EW weapon systems in a while. Let's go back and look at them so we baseline them for their effects and their capabilities, provide that data to the services. It will inform their procurement decisions, but also their investment decisions on those systems to determine, hey, maybe they don't work. Maybe they need something else to them to help. Or maybe they can add in another capability from another part of industry that will increase their effectiveness. And I think we saw that at the EWV baseline. That report will come out later this month, towards the end of the month, and I think that data will help inform procurement and investment decisions. So going forward, we'll continue to work with our partners to evaluate existing and new emerging technologies to facilitate the development of new solutions for the services and the COCOMs. And I think we have a bright future, and we'll continue to move forward in doing this effort. So, hey, thank you all very much. I'll wait for your questions. I'll be followed by Colonel Cedric Lee. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Good morning. The JCO's Requirements and Capabilities Division leads the development of doctrine, training, and requirements for the DoD counter-UAS efforts. So how do we do this? Well, really, the most important part, and first and foremost, is that we do this in collaboration with the services, combatant commands, and our industry partners, really through 3 major governance efforts. The first is identifying those capability gaps, right? So we focus on not only what the services are saying are capability gaps, but of course what the combatant commands are seeing out there in the field. But this helps really drive both not just the materiel solutions, but really more importantly what we focus on also in R&C is the non-material solution development, right? Because there are so many components outside of the hardware that we need to ensure that our warfighters understand how it integrates in a layered defense. Secondly, we continue to define those operational requirements that come from those capability gaps, right? So how do we drive those operational requirements, both from a material and non-material solution? So currently the JCO is conducting an update to the operational requirements document, which was published roughly about 2 years ago. We're going through that with the services and the combatant commands with the aim of publishing a new operational requirements document by the end of this calendar year. And thirdly, we appreciate all of the efforts of our industry partners to continue the advancement of counter-UAS capabilities. Mike alluded to it here a second ago. So how do we take those advancing capabilities and integrate them into our force, right? To get the best equipment into the hands of our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Coast Guardsmen. Well, we are currently developing a process, right, in which industry can submit their counter-UAS capabilities, and Mike alluded to it also earlier, to get JCO endorsement, and then finally really with the ultimate goal of how do we publicize those up-to-date advanced capabilities for the services and the combatant commands to then procure, right? So that's really JCO's role in that procurement process, right, so that we can get the best capabilities in the hands of the warfighters. Finally, I want to talk about what I'm probably most excited about, and that's training, right? So that's another part of our portfolio and within the JCO and specifically within the requirements and capabilities, right, where we are responsible for shepherding that training, that joint training. So currently we have a 2-week course out at Yuma, Arizona called the Joint Counter-UAS Academy, and that will transition to the Fire Center of Excellence out at Fort Sill by the first quarter of FY24 and transition to a Joint Counter-UAS University. It will maintain a 2-week level course, but the big difference, it'll be bifurcated into an operator's course and a planner's course. Again, going back to the origination of those capability gaps, right, of identifying the needs of the commanders on the ground to have that expertise to properly plan the employment of these counter-UAS systems, with the eventual goal of, by the first quarter of FY25, evolving to a 3-week course, right, with a capstone event for both a planner and operator's course. Foundational to all of this training is what the JCO has been working on and currently out in the JKO modules, right, 4 current modules for familiarization of counter-UAS training, as well as a 5th module which is in development for training for counter-UAS policy. So really that's it in a nutshell for what requirements and capabilities does, what we do for the Joint Counter-UAS Fight. Just as a recap, really we shepherd the governance process within those 3 lines of effort, right, between identifying capability gaps, identifying those requirements, and then how do we create that process for industry to get the best capability to our warfighters. And then, of course, finally, coordinating the training for our warfighters. With that, sir, I'll turn it over to you for final comments and questions.
You guys can stay up here. Might as well come on up here. So, told you I had a great team. Told you. And it's unfortunate the rest of my division chiefs aren't here to highlight what they're doing to get after this difficult problem set. Because there's a lot going on. You may not hear of all the things that are going on, but there's a lot going on out there. To recap, before we turn it into Q&A, 3 points I want you all to leave here with. There's no silver bullet. It takes a system approach integrated into a common C2 to get after this problem set. So whether you're bringing EW, a kinetic effector, DE, HPM, it should be able to integrate, and each one of those capabilities brings a different set of capabilities that can get after this problem and complex threat that we're seeing. As you see, there's several different type of threats, so you need layers, whether it's air defense systems or counter-UAS specific systems. And it's more than just material. A material system isn't going to drop where you want it and solve all your problems. It's just not going to happen. The training piece, TTPs, all have to be factored into this problem set, and we need to treat them equally as important as we do the material solution. And the last piece I'll close with is we talked a lot about the joint aspect, but I've also spent a lot of time with our partners, and I know some of our partners are in here today, and we all see it eye to eye. What I just highlighted to you, I was just at a NATO conference. They see it that same way of the system approach, no silver bullet. Let's integrate. They have a C2 system that they're working, potentially a Sapient type system. We want to integrate into their system so that we're talking with each other. So regardless of the capability you bring, if it can plug into the C2 system, it can deliver whatever effects it's capable of delivering to that warfighter. So having said that, we're open for questions.
Good morning to everybody. Thank you very much, sir, for this excellent presentation of your office. I'm Captain Dariusz Wichniarek. I'm a retired captain and from Poland, and I represent, Advanced Protection System. And I would like to ask you about how do you interact, or how do you take, the experience from foreign companies providing, the counter-UAS solution, especially, for example, like we are doing, we have, the battle-proven solution because we supply our Ukrainian neighbors, heroes, fighting against, Russia. Thank you.
Okay, I'll let Mike take that, my A&R Division Chief.
Yeah, thank you for that question. So we definitely are looking for those opportunities, and we have seen foreign vendors and companies come out at our demonstrations to provide their material, and we're looking forward for additional opportunities, either teaming with American companies or even looking for going abroad and looking at what is happening overseas with the COCOMs, for example, and different opportunities there. So we are looking at that now, and I know that's kind of on the forefront, and General Gainey just really had a conversation about that with a COCOM commander. So we are looking at those different opportunities, and I think that there's something very exciting coming forward on that topic.
So what I would tell you to close that off, if you have something that's great, see me personally. I'll make time to talk to everybody. I'll talk to anybody. Come talk to me, come see me, and my good friend John DeForno, my technology officer.
Hi, Brandy Vinson from Defense Scoop. Thank you all so much for doing this. I actually have two questions. The first one's for you, Major General Gainey. Can you tell us a little bit about what you are learning from the current conflict with Russia and Ukraine about maybe gaps that the U.S. has for future conflicts?
Well, I won't get into specifics of gaps, but I will tell you what we're learning. I think what we're learning is pretty much what we already knew, is the layered approach. It takes a layered. You leverage your air defense systems, you leverage your counter-UAS EW systems, and you leverage whatever counter-UAS kinetic effectors you have to be able to get after the threat, because the threat ranges from whether it's a one-way attack, almost like cruise missile type, so you're probably going to need, you can use EW, but you probably want to use some of your kinetic air defense or counter-UAS effectors. Then you have your small off-the-shelf quadcopters that can provide ISR, and normally our EW systems do pretty good against that type of threat and anything else you may have. So I think what we learned is reinforcement and a validation of what, remember, we're learning too in CENTCOM, because we're seeing this threat in CENTCOM, maybe not as in the volume in some of the aspects of Ukraine, but we're still seeing it, and we're seeing that CENTCOM threat matriculate into the Ukraine area. So, in some aspects, we have a leg up on seeing some of these effects as it goes into other type theaters. So, and the training aspect, the training piece, having soldiers that understand their capability and able to employ effects. And again, they're having success over there, as you heard highlighted over here with some of the systems. But again, when you get to volume, how are you able to defeat with a range of systems to respond to the volume?
Thank you so much. And then Colonel Parent, can you just tell us a little bit more about that RFP on the Group 3 attack capabilities? What are you hoping to really get out of it, and why that topic?
Okay, so it is a request for white paper. It's going to go out and in the next week or two, once we get it through our staffing process, we want to make sure we dot all our I's, we really understand what we want from industry to get after what we have as our high priority threat. And right now, the high priority threat is the one-way attack. We see that a lot in theater. You had mentioned earlier, what is out there and what are we reacting to, and the layered defense. That one-way attack is something that we have been told again and again by the COCOMs and the services that this is something that's evolving, and the enemy gets a vote. We all know that. So the enemy gets a vote, and that vote is that they are evolving, and we must therefore evolve with it. So this is something that's coming up quickly. We really focus our demos on 1s and 2s. So now this next demo will focus on Group 3. And that Group 3, that one-way attack, and that white paper will come out, and we want to get the goodness from industry and what they can do to go ahead and get after that. So we feel we're in a good place. As always, we have an aggressive timeline. We're going to put that request for white paper out. We're going to expect industry to come back very quickly. We're going to evaluate their proposals, hear from them about those proposals, and then we're going to react very quickly to it and get to that demo and very quickly get after it.
And however, I don't want you to walk away from here thinking that we don't have capability just because we're doing a demo. We do have capability, and our integrated air and missile defense posture that we're developing in the Army also provides a capability against the Group 3 also.
Sir, good morning. Toby Magzik from L3 Harris, and thank you all for doing this morning. Sir, you mentioned a few times, I think several of you did, about the importance of integrating into C-2 systems. What C-2 systems do we need to integrate, and how does that differ across services and combatant commands?
Yeah, so right now we integrate into FAD C2. So if you look at specifically like in a CENTCOM AOR, where you have several services occupying the same location, the integration, we're moving towards FAD C2. Now, however, that's not saying all this. Now, the services have other C2 systems with an effort to C2 get into FAD C2. That's the short term. The long term is to get away from a specific C2 box and then just plug into the architecture with, and we're doing some things with UC2 to eventually to get onto the DoD JAD C2 aspect of framing this problem set. But right now, it's FAD C2. So when we bring capability to the demos, we want them integrated into FAD C2 so our warfighters that are out there have a common C2 system. But again, your question was valid because there are services, Air Force uses the Medusa stateside, and Marines are leveraging the ADSI. But again, from an integration perspective of supporting the warfighter, it's FAD C2 right now, moving forward. Come on, I know y'all aren't going to let my division chiefs off the hook. I tell them every time I go somewhere and talk, I get several questions. And now it's their opportunity to answer some hard questions. I want to give them that opportunity.
Creighton from ADS Incorporated in Virginia Beach. I read an article in Wired Magazine where our Ukrainian brothers and sisters were using Juul cigarettes, the actuators out of them, to provide the dropping mechanisms on their homemade drones. So less of a military doctrine question, more of a mindset maybe from all four of you guys. How do you guys deal, how do you conceptualize that as a potential threat? Not the Ukrainians, of course, but the ability for a hobbyist to take apart an electronic cigarette and turn it into a threat to our soldiers?
Thank you.
But that is a tough question, right? I think generally from a training perspective, right, I think I'll try to attack this from two perspectives. There's a training perspective and then there's a requirements perspective, right? So from a training perspective, a lot of that evolving TTPs that we're seeing out in the field, we're gathering through our ops division as well as the R&C division to go out and see, right, what are the current capabilities that are out there and what are the creative ways in which these operators are using them, right? And sometimes not even in a hostile way, right? It's just, operators who are benignly operating, right, but then may cause some issues for us, right? So I think there is a training perspective in which we need to develop certain TTPs so that the operators who are out in the field and on the screen can can quickly notice, right, and non-hostile acts. And that's evolving, right? And so as we go into developing not only our doctrine and our TTPs, right, we're constantly going out to the combatant commands to get that feedback, and so that we can observe those types of evolving techniques. From a requirements perspective, you know, we're really leveraging both the combatant commands and the services to show us and really highlight those gaps that are out there. And so do we need to have either a material solution against that, or do our current material solutions, maybe used in a slightly different way by altering our TTPs, get after those evolving threats? And so that's how, from a JCO perspective, we're kind of pulling those two efforts together, both from a material and non-material solution, to find creative ways. Now, it's easier said than done, right? Because understanding the impacts of how the threat is evolving, whether or not it requires a material solution, can be difficult at times. But again, which is why we have both in our process looking at both material and non-material solutions.
And I do want to add that we do have our bi-weekly meetings with academia, with vendors. And so once we understand some of what the threat is and what the requirement is, we can hear from industry and academia that, hey, look, you just brought that up. By the way, I think I have a solution to get after that. And then that can come to the forefront and bubble up. And then we can either work with the services based on that requirement, to work with the services to develop something, or get into an experimentation or demonstration.
So to wrap this up, you bring up a very interesting point, because that is the crux of my problem in some cases when it comes to getting funding, additional funding against this type of threat. Because there are some that will believe it's more of a hazard. You know, some of these UASs may encroach on airspace. You know, maybe in some contingency locations you'll see these used as in a hostile act. But I see it just how you phrase it, and that's kind of why my office was formed, to look at it from that perspective and drive the requirements to get after those exact instances when we build capabilities and employ capabilities, and not look at it just as a hazard, but as a threat. And that's, as we developed our DoD strategy, that was probably the most difficult aspect of that strategy. Where do you divide the line between it's just a hazard and it's a valid threat? Do you want to focus that overseas because that drives resources? And how much resources do you want to put against this problem set? Because the challenge you just laid out could indicate you need to resource this thing everywhere, anywhere, because just the hobbyist can make this some sort of explosive capability. And I think not just us in DoD, I think everybody's dealing with this in the interagency. I mean, you look at things like Super Bowl, where our DHS has to deal with this problem set. So it's a good question. So.
Good morning, sir. Mark Passy, C5ISR Center. I was wondering, how are you guys engaging with the Army S&T, or I guess DoD-wide S&T community, to ensure everyone's pushing in the same direction and make sure there's minimal duplication of effort?
Okay, when you first said Army S&T, I was about to look at my friend Pat Costello and say, hey, Pat, answer that question, because I don't know if most of you know this, but, you know, as the executive agent, we look at it from a joint DoD-wide, but each service specifically focuses on it. And Pat Costello and his AMD CFT hat is looking at Army-specific S&T efforts across the Army. But when you look at a DoD perspective, we leverage heavily RNE, OSD RNE, who will do semi-annual S&T deep dives and come together, bring all the services together, and look at what is out there from an S&T perspective to get after this evolving threat, you know, matched against the capability gaps and where do we need to move to forward. And since it's an S&T question, I'll give it to Mike also if he has anything else to add for my A&R division section.
I'll just add that we do work closely with the services on different things as well to make sure we get at what they're talking about and what they're working on to inform us. And we have our 06 meetings and forward. We're continually talking. Communication and dialogue is the most important to find out what the services are doing. and how can we support and help?
Okay, I think we've got about 5 more minutes, so if there's one pressing question. Forrest Smith. Command Sergeant Major Foley. All right, I'm calling y'all out, so I don't want to hear it later. Dave Stewart. Okay, well, again, I appreciate your time, but what I'm going to do, I'm going to give Sergeant Major Carr the last word as we close this out.
I just want to make sure everybody understands this. So as we frame the problem, understand we're in a zero growth environment. There's not going to be a counter UAS MOS in the foreseeable future. So the question is, how do we build our bench of counter UAS experts at echelon? And as we mentioned, we've got the counter UAS school in the academy. The training is there, but I just want to, I'll quote a master sergeant on a recent visit to Iraq who said this. He said, you're giving us $10 billion worth of capabilities and $10 worth of training. And he was spot on. So we have to have the same sense of urgency, command teams at echelon, building your bench of expertise. Operators, planners, working in your BDOCs, all of the above, but don't think that this is the counter UAS threat, as we've everybody talked about. It is not an air defense problem. It is not, it's the Army's problem to solve. So we need to get our best and brightest officers, warrant officers, non-commissioned officers, and soldiers into those academies. And oh, by the way, we also have mobile training teams, et cetera. So we need to get hot on that training because the same sense of urgency our adversaries are using, we need to have that as well.
Well said, well said. Cool.